let's start going over the unit circle. I do have this PDF uploaded in Focus. If you have a printer, please go ahead, print it out and start filling it in. We are going to be referring back to this frequently. If you don't have a printer, you can't print it, that's fine. I would recommend that you just do this on a sheet of paper, follow along. So let's start out with our quadrantal angles. We're going to just work with degrees and radians in this video. So here we start out at 0 degrees. Moving up here, 90 degrees. Right here, 180 degrees. We've gone halfway around the unit circle. And then down here we have 270 degrees. These are our quadrantal angles. Let's go ahead now. Let's do these in radians. Oops, I missed 360 degrees. Whoopsie. 360 degrees, a full rotation. So on radians now, 0, 90 degrees in radians is pi over 2. Coming around here to 180 degrees, this is pi. Coming back down here, this is 3 pi over 2. Okay, let's bring it back. Let's tackle 45 degrees. Here's 45 degrees. If I add another 45 degrees, that brings me to 90 degrees. Add 45 degrees to 90 degrees, we are at 135 degrees. Add another 45 degrees, that brings us to 180 degrees. Add another 45 degrees, we are at 225 degrees. Plus 45 degrees brings us to 270 degrees. 270 degrees plus 45 degrees, it brings us to 315 degrees. If you add another 45 degrees, you are back at 360 degrees. Okay, let's do the radians. Okay, 45 degrees in radians is pi over 4. So if we move another pi over 4, that is 2 pi over 4. Notice 2 pi over 4 reduces down to pi over 2. 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4. Move another pi over 4, 3 pi over 4 plus 4 pi over 4 brings us to 4 pi over 4, which reduces down to pi. Plus another pi over 4, now we're at 5 pi over 4. 6 pi over 4. 7 pi over 4. Eight pi over 4. Well, 8 pi over 4 is going to reduce down to 2 pi, and I just realized I missed that one. That should be 2 pi. Okay, so that was 45 degrees and pi over 4. Now let's go look at 30 degrees. Okay, 30 degrees, if we move another 30 degrees, that's 60 degrees, 90 degrees. This might get a little confusing. Let's do reference angles. So here's 30 degrees. If I'm going to go into quadrant 2, remember, that's 180 degrees minus 30 degrees, which is 150 degrees. Now I have to move another 30 degrees. Well, 180 degrees plus 30 degrees is 210 degrees. Coming over here in quadrant 4, here's 30 degree. This is my reference angle. Well, 360 degrees minus 30 degrees is 330 degrees. Now, you could still have gone around the unit circle, 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, etc., and done it that way, and you would have caught all the 60 degree measures as well. I want to get you guys familiar with those reference angles. When you take your test, you're going to need to show me your use of reference angles. Let's do 30 degrees now in radians. So 30 degrees in radians is pi over 6. Okay, so here's pi over 6. Again, remember 30 plus 30 is 60. Pi over 6, 2 pi over 6. 3 pi over 6 reduces down to pi over 2. 4 pi over 6. 5 pi over 6. 6 pi over 6. 7 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6, 9 pi over 6, 9 pi over 6 reduces down to 3 pi over 2. We would then have 10 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6. Okay, and we've gone all the way around with our pi over 6 reference angle. 60 degrees. 60 degrees, you can add another 60 degrees is 120 degrees. You could also look at it as a reference angle. 180 degrees minus 60 degrees is 120 degrees. Down here in quadrant 3, 180 degrees plus 60 degrees is 240 degrees. 240 degrees plus another 60 degrees is 300 degrees. And again, you could also look at this in quadrant 4. Here's your reference angle of 60 degrees. 360 degrees minus that 60 degrees brings you to 300 degrees. Now let's go ahead and do this in radians. 60 degrees in radians is pi over 3. So here's pi over 3. If you move another pi over 3, you're at 2 pi over 3. Move another pi over 3, 3 pi over 3. 4 pi over 3. 5 pi over 3. And then if you move another pi over 3, well, that's 6 pi over 3. 6 pi over 3 is 2 pi. So we just went ahead, we filled in everything with degrees and radians. I'm going to stop the video now and I will do the coordinates in the next video.